I'm here from Vienna. I work for Bitfly and I work on the Beacon Chain Explorer. Today I'm going to talk a bit about our Explorer. I'm going to give an outlook on how block explorers are going to change or how they must kind of adapt to kind of the merge that's coming up. And then in general I'm going to talk a bit about also how to run a validator. So first, the Beacon Chain Explorer. I'm going to give you a bit of an overview for that. So we started developing the Beacon Chain Explorer at the end of 2019. We were kind of part of most of the test nets. It was the first Beacon Chain Explorer, and then Etherscan also created one called Beacon Scan. And the main goal for us is to kind of give the user a better idea of what's going on in the beacon chain. Instead of just querying the node itself all the time, we wanted to kind of help him navigate what's going on in a really easy to digest manner. And that's kind of the goal for us at Beacon Chain. We created this Explorer and made it open source for people to kind of spin up and play around with themselves. And it's kind of with the decentralized ethos. And right now we have around 500,000 page views per month. And here you can see kind of like the landing page. And the services we offer, I'm going to go into that, but first I'd like to maybe kind of get a feel for how many people are actually running a validator here. If you could maybe raise your hand. So that's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people are running a validator. How many people have gotten slashed so far? Okay, that's good, I guess. And how many people would like to run a validator or are thinking of maybe running a validator? That's around 3 people, okay. So that talk is for you guys, more or less. And what we basically offer is kind of a way to kind of explore the current state of the beacon chain, past state. You can view your validators, you can view your earnings, what's going on, and you can also have like general analytical overview of kind of how the finality is right now, how much participation there is in the network over time. We offer alerts, so if you're running a validator, you can kind of set up alerts if you will create an account with us. And then if it goes offline or if you propose a block, you will get a notification either email or through our mobile application. And we also offer API services. And these API services are if you are building an app and if you would like to integrate some information from the beacon chain into your application, then you can, without running your own nodes, you can use that. And on the side here, you can basically see kind of the current view. So you can see if the epoch is finalized. You can kind of see how long ago it is, which epoch it is, the participation, and how much ETH was used to kind of validate this, how many validators and how much ETH is staked at the moment. And at the bottom, you can see the most recent blocks that were proposed, which proposer proposed the block, and you can see how many attestations, aggregated attestations there are. Next, I'm going to talk a bit about the infrastructure. It's still quite simple that we use. So we run each of these services basically in an individual virtual machine. We have a Prism node, and then we have an Infura ETH1. We kind of outsource that and use an Infura ETH1 node. That basically goes then to an exporter. All that information we extract it, and the exporter is just a Go program that we wrote, and it writes everything into a Postgres database. And then the extracted information, we can query all of that from our front-end Go that we just kind of inject into some templates, and then we can show that to the user. That's basically just an overview of how we run the Explorer. And later on, if it gets a bit bigger, kind of with the challenges, since running a Prism node with all of the information, we set it so it doesn't prune information, so ours is currently nearly 600 gigabytes in size. that's quite a lot for the average user, or it might become quite a lot for the average user. This is just half a year, but in a year or 2 years, this will be quite a lot more to get all of the information, to extract all of it, so you can query it later. And then, I mean, we were using Infura, but just to get a feel, I added kind of like an archive node, which is 1.4 terabyte, and then our database, which is 2 terabyte right now. So that's kind of a bit of a challenge to keep this also a bit decentralized. And later on, with the sharding, this will be even more challenging, as even more and more data is produced, the more Ethereum scales. The next thing that's a bit challenging is running and maintaining all of the nodes with all of the updates. And one of the even bigger challenges is the number of validators. As they grow, the much faster and the much slower our exporter has to be, and much faster the export has to be, and much slower the exports become. So we always have to tune and optimize the exporter to keep it up to date. And we've had some other people spin up explorers, and they just start lagging behind if you don't maintain it. Next, I'm going to give just a brief overview of the beacon chain. So we've worked on this explorer to kind of represent phase 0 of the beacon chain, and that's basically the first step from the proof of work to the proof of stake. And it uses kind of the greediest, heaviest observed subtree ghost algorithm to kind of quickly and fast create new information, so it has liveness. And then lagging behind to create finality, we have the Casper algorithm that also looks, instead of just proposing blocks, it also looks at the attestations and how many people actually believe this is the canonical chain. And in the end, the beacon chain right now, it just mainly consists of epoch slots and validators, and acts as kind of like, as previously mentioned, a coordination layer. And then to a bit of the history that went through with the explorers, the different testnets that we supported. So we had a testnet for Zinken, Spadina, and Medalla. And these testnets were not always perfect. They had quite a few issues that were worked on by the client teams. For example, during Medalla, there was quite a long period where finality was not found because of a clock issue with Prism, which was one of the main clients that was used. Had a kind of a clock issue with using, I think, Cloudflare, and then I think half the network went offline. So far in the mainnet, we did not have that, luckily. But all of these testnets prepared us quite well for the mainnet launch, and so far, more than half a year in, it's been working quite smoothly. And for the Genesis, so the deposits opened in November, and it took until kind of like a week before launch. People were actually a bit like scared that we weren't going to reach the deposit threshold to start the beacon chain, but luckily we did. So the threshold was 500,000 Ethereum that needed to be staked, and we managed to reach that, as I said, 1 week before. And then here we had a really nice Genesis view when it happened, and also a kind of like a checklist of everything that should go right. Kind of like the first few blocks should be proposed here, and that overall here the participation should reach, I think, over 66%, so over 2/3 of the participation. So this was basically the genesis of the beacon chain, and it went really, really well. And it started off with 21,000 validators, and in the beginning you would receive a return of 20%, but as the number of validators grew, the less of a return you would receive, because it would be shared with more validators that are active. And comparing it to today, so half a year later, we have 200,000 validators, so that's a 10x increase in validators. So the confidence in this beacon chain project has increased tremendously, especially with all the staking pools that joined. And in total, there has only been one invalid deposit where 1 ETH was lost. So if you go on through the launchpad and you want to deposit the funds, the launchpad does the signing for you. But if you try and do it manually and something goes wrong, that can go, well, the ETH can go lost. And overall, around 200 people deposited too many funds. So instead of 32 Ethereum, they deposited 64 Ethereum, and that's a bit unfortunate because you can't withdraw the money yet. So they have just twice as much money lying around validating. And the top known depositor, as you've seen the chart maybe if you were before, from our site, it's not perfect, but it's kind of the information that we have available to us, is that Kraken, which offers a pool, has around 13% right now of the validators that are running of the deposited ETH. And in total, around 150 validators were slashed. They then lost some funds and they will be kicked out of the system. And lastly, we have 4 validators with a perfect record. So since more than half a year, they have not gone offline. They have not had internet issues or anything. And they've haven't missed a single attestation, which is really, really well done. I did not manage to do that. So to the third part, I'm going to talk about how to run a validator, kind of using the tools that we're building, and how to monitor, how to set it up. In the beginning, it's important, if you're thinking of like spinning up a validator, it's important to really consider, is it profitable for me right now? Because the more people join, the less profitable it will become. So right now, I just kind of took an extract, and right now, in a year, it kind of estimates that you would earn around 2 ETH, which is around $4,000 right now. But you really have to take that with a grain of salt because so much changes. Like right now, in half a year, we have 10 times as many validators. So this could really change in half a year again quite tremendously. And maybe there are other opportunities like liquidity providing that would be more lucrative depending on what risk factor you want to engage in. And something to consider is that the earnings are based on effective balance. They're not based on the balance that the validator occurs. So if you deposit, you have an effective balance of 32 ETH and a balance of 32 ETH, and the rewards get added to your balance, not to your effective balance. So there are no cumulative rewards. So you just earn the 6% return on the effective balance of 32, and it cannot rise over 32, which is also something to consider if you want compounding effects maybe. And another thing that's very important is network stability. Your reward does not only depend on your validator alone, but it also depends on all the other validators that are running and if they are doing the things that the protocol expects. So if there's only a 90% participation rate, you would earn less than if there were an overall 99% participation rate, even if your validator is doing everything correctly. Then next, if you want to stake, then you would have to go to the launchpad, which is made really nicely from Ethereum.org. And there you would have to choose kind of like how you would want to stake, what hardware you would want to use to run it. You can choose there, you have a guide, what Ethereum 1 node you would like to use. We also have on our website, we have kind of a list here of the different Ethereum 1 clients and of the different Ethereum 2 clients. And you can also subscribe to the updates that if one of the client versions get updated. And you get email notifications and even in our mobile app, push notifications so you know when to update your software. And then over the launchpad, you can generate the keys for the validator and send the deposits to the Ethereum 1 chain. And once it's in the Ethereum 1 chain, it takes some time to be picked up by the beacon chain. It has follow distance, ETH1 follow distance that is set to around 2048 blocks. And then after that time, so here is when you deposit over the launchpad, this is kind of the view that you get on our Explorer that kind of informs you that you made a deposit, but it has not been picked up by the beacon chain. And at the bottom, you kind of have a view that it got picked up by the beacon chain, and then you know exactly when it will be activated. So you actually know when to turn on your validator, when to spin it up, and when it should be active and staking so you don't lose any funds. And yeah, you should really make sure that it's active when it reaches the set epoch, the activation epoch. Otherwise, you will lose funds. And then just to the income, I kind of zoomed out here. you can see kind of like over the half the year when to Genesis, the validator account increased, and then the rewards of individual validators started to go down. That's kind of over there. And the spikes here is when a validator proposes, and then the reward is a bit bigger for that day. So that each one of these bars is kind of the earnings for one day of the validator. And then here you kind of can see a page with the proposals. Here you kind of see what slot you propose the block in. You can also add a graffiti. We have kind of like a graffiti board as well, where you can draw something if you add coordinates there, kind of for fun. And next are kind of the attestations. They're also important that you have a good network connection, that if you attest to a certain block, that attestation gets inserted in a later block, and it should be inserted basically right after. So you can see here you attested for this slot, and it should be inserted in the next. It should be basically added to the chain in the next slot. And if it's added in the next slot, you have basically an optimal inclusion. Otherwise, your validator is not performing at an optimal effectiveness. You would maybe check what's going on. Maybe the network is not, where your validator is running, is not stable enough. And then next, I'll quickly go over the Validator app. So here we basically have similar information that we have on the website, but it's more optimized for on the go. And you can also get push notifications, and we also added, so here you can basically see kind of like when a client updates, you can see your earnings right now and the proposed here as well, and kind of compare your rank to other validators as well. And then we have monitoring for the app as well. So if you have a beacon node, this is for Lighthouse. If you have a beacon node, you can monitor your client with the app. So you don't need any extra monitoring. You can easily set it up by just adding a flag. So a monitoring endpoint flag to Lighthouse, so to the beacon node and to the validator client. And if you add it, you can basically get here kind of the network, the metrics of your validator, of your hardware, just like straight away in the app. And you can also add notification settings. So if the node that you're running does not have enough storage anymore, you get a push notification. It's really easy to set up just with one flag. And the last thing for running a validator is you should have to watch out for slashing. So here's kind of like a bar chart of the addresses, the ETH1 addresses that got slashed the most. So here we have kind of like staked US with the ETH1 address here that got slashed, got 53 slashing, so they lost 53 validators. And then here you have the kind of like the top 5 slashings that I added here. So you should really make sure that you only run one process. We had, on Reddit, we saw someone who tried out our metrics, and he didn't realize that he's already running one validator client, and then he spun up another validator client with the metrics endpoint, and then got slashed, which is really unfortunate. So really watch out that you're only running one process. And there are 2 different kinds of slashings right now. There's attestation violations, and there's proposer violations. So for example, if you propose in one slot, you propose 2 conflicting blocks. And once you're slashed, your validator exits the system, but not straight away. There's something called an inactivity leak, where the validator first loses funds for being slashed, and then over time it loses some more funds before the validator will be withdrawable. And once it's withdrawable, then it stops losing funds. So yeah, if you want to contribute, since it's open source, those are the links. If you want to check it out, if you want to spin it up, you can check it out. You can create issues, you can create pull requests, or you can tweet at etherchain.org. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, or how long do we have?
We have 2 minutes here.
Yeah, if there's any questions. Otherwise, I'll pass off. Yeah. Thank you.